We've all heard the phrase elephant in the room. And to be honest, some of us still cohabitate with them. What's your story? Let's talk about it.
So I guess, which leads me more so to the point of, so let's fast forward. You had your experiences. I met you obviously when we first started going to APU, and I remember hearing so many of these aspects of your story. And here you are now, 8-9 years later, doing music. Got your EP out. It's your second one, right? Because I remember first EP.
I had a single, Breathe Out, but this is my first EP.
Got you, because I'm, in fact, that just came on my Spotify playlist actually a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute. That's my beat right there.
Dreamer, yeah.
Yes, Dreamer is my bop. So I guess what I'm curious is, Asia, so here you are this many years later. I want to switch gears a little bit in your story, because I know now, obviously, how we met was we both were part of a music and worship program. Mm-hmm. Neither one of us are music pastors now.
Correct. Absolutely accurate. Absolutely accurate.
And the reason I want to tie in the aspects about your life story, because again, I know that's also playing a lot into, again, just of who you are, how you've been dealt with in ministry, how you've navigated ministry again, and obviously you've worked together. We've done all sorts of music together, music worship nights, all sorts of different things. I'm curious on, here we are, fast forward. Now you're working with Patti LaBelle. You're doing all the things that you want to do. What happens with ministry, and how do we end up moving away from that whole piece, and why?
Ministry continues. And I don't think that we ever move away from it. I think we do what ministry was intended to do. And we take what we learn from the four walls and apply it outside. I think where some of where we tripped up in church and the four walls is not creating disciples for the purpose of sending them out. I think the church sometimes, all church, sometimes makes a whole bunch of minions for the sake of how that one church should be run.
Why do you think they do that?
I think there's a list of reasons. I think one is being unwilling to pass the torch and thinking it's necessary to die in the pulpit when it's so not. We are not in the Old Testament where you need to wait until Moses dies to pass it. I think it's a lack of being honest about who you are, so you really run away your youth and you don't have anyone to disciple anymore, so now you have to keep the ones that you have still in your church, because that's the only place that your help is going to come from. But and then the other reasons, I don't know why we talk about who Jesus was in the byways and the miracles that he performed on the street. Excuse me. And think that that's not where ministry is supposed to be applied. I don't really know. And it's disheartening.
It's beyond disheartening, because there was a post that you actually shared the other day that I saw on Facebook that I was like, okay, this is lowkey spot on, and it's real. Because like you, I have stepped away from working in ministry full time. I worked for churches, that was my job. It's where I got my bread and butter paycheck. It was something I really was thoroughly committed to, and really, truly, and honestly still do love. But you, when you encounter so many of these other things, and I'm gonna just be real,
Sure.
My personal opinion is, I think a lot of pastors and a lot of people end up in these places of leadership have a lot of deep insecurities and have a lot of deep seated control issues and things that are really related more so to them that have nothing to do with God or spirituality, or they happen to be really charismatic people who can actually engage a crowd, or who can really actually engage with people and can have the personas to do that, but aren't actually really leaders. They're not actually really meant to be leading people. Just like, again, we have people who have kids but are not really parents, not really meant to be a
Sure.
parent, but they have children. There's plenty of people who can do the role and who will end up in leadership. And I can say, again, I'm not going to just speak from my own experience, but a lot of people I've even seen, worked with in ministry. A lot of the leaders I encountered, again, where you talk about where they don't want to release you, where they don't want to let you go, where they want everything in house. And there was a post that you shared that I'm like, it's kind of like really summarized it, where you put, or not you put, but you shared it on behalf of somebody else who shared it. And they said, I never thought I'd say this, but I think I'm going to chill on leading worship for a while. Tired of feeling used without concern for who I am or my life outside of what I can do for a particular ministry. I'm over it. I'll worship at home. And that post had so much engagement and likes and comments, and you just reshared it. It wasn't even your original post. But I thought that spoke something because, again, as I went through the comments and I even left my own comment, like, I couldn't do nothing but help resonate with so much of what that person had actually said. And obviously you resonated with it too, because
Sure.
there's been so many times where, again, obviously I can relate a lot to the over-serving or giving too much or overextending ourselves, childhood trauma, other things that I can definitely own and say that we're on me now. But a lot of it is just kind of part of how the system works. We critique the, racism and all the other systems, but let's talk about the system in the church, that is in the Black church particularly, that has been developed, that also upholds a certain system of power.
Mm-hmm.
And that also upholds certain things, standards and things that I don't think we really want to talk about. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious for you, why did you share that post?
I shared it because I completely felt every word, especially when it came to the disregard for the wellness of the worship leader.
Let's talk about it.
It is a disregard.
You are
It's
an object.
you like and the reason I hone in so much on disregard is, in order to really disregard something, you have to first regard and acknowledge it, to simply say, anyway, moving on.
Exactly. Yep.
And that is, first off, just so backwards scripturally. Like, if we want to go back and really examine Leviticus and the way the church was actually supposed to be run, and
Yeah.
what was supposed to be done with the parishioners' finances and their tithe and their offering, and how it was supposed to be distributed, where did this thing about Pastors Day come from, where you have to raise $1,900 for each and every single and auxiliary in your church to give solely to you?
Right.
Excuse me.
I
You know what I'm
mean,
saying? Like, it became a business. I knew there was this one place that I was working for,
mm-hmm.
and for about 7 months I had been without a car. I think I was still at APU, like finishing up
I
APU.
remember this. Yeah.
I think so.
Yep.
And I hadn't had a car because my car was, acting funny and breaking down, and I was in a lift. And one day I had a meeting just to negotiate. Oh no, this was right after I graduated, to negotiate, my pay,
Yep.
because I haven't said anything this whole time, and now I have my degree in exactly this.
And let's talk about it. You were also driving from Timbuktu to like
To East Jesus Nowhere.
East Jerusalem. Do you hear me? I mean, it
Bless
was
you.
far. I mean, because
Yes,
I
it
went a few
was.
times. So yeah, it was
Yeah, yes, it
definitely,
was. Yes,
yeah.
it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so after being, kind of a little bit laughed in my face about my request, I walked outside and my Lyft had come to pick me up, and they were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Going home." They were like, "You're in a Lyft?" And I was like, "Yeah." Have been for 7 months.
Right.
Didn't tell
And no
them
one
that,
even,
but
yeah.
there is a disregard for just the little things that I'm going through. More recently, there's been this other church that I've been helping out with, and I feel like I blow my voice completely out
Mm.
because of now it's become a thing where sometimes, more often than not, you'll find where the pastor expects the worship leader to do 85% of the service, and he or she will come up behind you, just smooth sailing, okay, smooth
Because you're
sailing
tilling,
up.
your job is to till the ground and make it fertile for them to come in, right? So I got to do pumping and priming, getting people engaged. Like, again, they basically, because that's another piece that I really want to mention is, side note, a lot of pastors expect worship leaders to be like spiritual cheerleaders. And that's not our
Absolutely,
role and that's not our
it's
job
not a role.
at all. It's not what
That's
we're
that's not a
not
role.
what we're designed to do, but that's what a lot of churches I think have ended up morphing the role into, like, get everybody
Yeah,
worked up, get them like prepare their hearts and their minds so they can be ready to receive the word. And I realized, like, actually that's an individual thing. Like, that's something that people have to either want on their own or
Absolutely, and
not.
that's where I've sort of wanted to really take a step back, because not only am I starting to build a little bit of resentment for the church staff,
Yes.
but I'm building up a resentment for the parishioner, because it is not my job to make sure that when I say our God is greater, don't you agree? You have a simple refusal to engage in worship with me. What did you come here for? I'm not
But
going
I
to beg you.
think I'm gonna be real about this, Asia. I think
Yeah,
that's one of the pieces about, again, where I feel like as well the black church, I think we have been conditioned, I think even as worship leaders, we've been conditioned to think that if people aren't molding a certain way,
sure,
are responding in a certain, and I think APU is actually one of the places that helped teach me that, because when I'm around these people, then, or even Evergreen, the place where I used to work at, and
sure,
like when these people come up to me afterwards, like, wow, God really moved, and that really moved me. I really felt moved. And I'm
sure.
thinking, when I'm looking at y'all like,
But see, you can tell when it's, because I had to learn that too.
because you can tell the
Understanding the
difference.
different worship styles,
Yes.
understand that completely. But
Yep.
when it comes to a situation where they're just not engaging,
Or they want to be entertained. They want you
bye.
to
Yeah,
put
that's what it
like
was. That's
pump
what
and
it was. Because
prime.
because right, like
Yes.
you talked about how black church, we expect this exuberant,
Yep.
very boisterous, Uh, but what CCM has done has become a very exuberant show, which
Yes.
prompts an exuberant response from. So you know what I'm saying. Now you're starting to see really a Pentecostal-ish response from even their worshipers. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yep.
this is not how it's this.
It's gotten to, yeah, it's just too focused on, again, these very outwardly, and again, I cannot tell you how many people I've seen quicken, speak in tongues, fall out, and be the raggedest people I've ever met. And again, I'm
Yeah,
not, and that's not like to say, like, again, obviously, we all are trying to figure it out, but I'm just saying, like, again,
sure,
I think that's something I felt like you, I had to learn and discern the difference between, like, when are people just here because they're just expecting you to do all of the work? And again, I think sometimes pastors can unexpectedly set that tone as well, especially if it's a more
absolutely,
performance-based church, because they're putting
absolutely,
the parishioners in the mindset that, oh, the worship leader's going to pump and prime you and get you kind of going. And I've seen a few churches where the pastor will get in alignment with the worship leader and be like, listen, here's why we worship, here's why it's important. And we create a
sure,
combined series, or we're trying to address it from from both perspectives of why it's important and why it actually matters. But I don't think a lot of people address that. And I think one of the bigger pieces, one of the elephants in the room that I really want, that I want to hone in on is just like you said, is disregard. Because on one end, somebody could say, well, Asia, you didn't say anything about you needing a car, or you need this, or you need that. But then what does it go to show when you say, hey, I want to talk to you about a raise. I've been here for this many amount of months or this year or however long. And obviously you one of the baddest of the baddest. And when I say bad, y'all, that means she's amazing. She's an amazing worship leader. And I don't mean just like be gifted, but like somebody who actually like can seriously open up the atmosphere and like actually make you feel like you actually connecting to God.
Mhm.
But again, as you're bringing that up, it takes them having to see you getting into a lift and that whole piece for them to say, okay, maybe here's why she would deserve more. Your
Mhm.
merit, what you've done, the other work, none of those pieces really end up actually factoring in until they find some pieces of like, oh, we'll give compassion to this. And I
Mhm.
think that's a piece that, again, that I don't know if we always really talk about. It's like, why? And I think that leads into the aspect of the disregard that you're talking about.
Mhm.
Where on one end, how does it take somebody that long to see that you've been taking a lift and these other things? Now, obviously, it's your situation. You own that. You're doing what you got to do to survive. You took the job. You do what you got to do. But I think, again, there's a huge lack of a lack of appreciation and consideration for people who serve not just worship leaders, but people who serve in ministry in general. I've seen people who serve for churches left and right and do everything, and it never be even appreciated or even acknowledged.
Absolutely.
Has that been something you've seen as well? Because I'm
Oh
talking about like
yeah.
this has been something like's been major.
Oh yeah. I've seen that time and time again, and that disgusts me. Like, to be in some of these services, and because when like moves of the Lord happen, especially in music worship,
Hmm.
it's a dance between the worship leader, band, and the Lord. Like, it's a literal prophetic download.
Yeah,
So for people to see the clear connection that their worship leader has with the Lord, and how he or she is able to cultivate such an atmosphere for your church time and time and time and time and time again
yeah,
without acknowledgement. And it disgusts me, because you can see the wear and tear on their body. You can see the wear and tear in their soul, in their spirit. You can see the wear and tear. You can see when they completely become consumed by the need of that church and not themselves. And people just, oh, sister so and so gonna lead us, brother so and so gonna do it.
right.
What?
But I think that leads me to like the deeper pieces where one, I feel like the work is on both ends. Where one, again, I think we don't always realize our value and our worth. It's taken me years to realize the
Sure.
value and the worth and what I actually bring to the table and what I do
Sure,
for
it's definitely
ministries.
equal responsibility. It's
It
responsibility of
is
the church to acknowledge, but it's also responsibility of worship leader and self to say, "Hey,
literally.
I was created to worship, but that there are many other ways that I can acknowledge Him with my life than solely this."
And off top of that, I don't think we are really taught this because I think Americanism has really leached into how the church kind of operates and moves. But
Absolutely.
it's okay to have boundaries and limits around your gifts because
Yes, it is.
your boundaries and your gifts aren't for everybody. And no matter how much spiritual language people wrap things up in, which they will
Absolutely.
do, sometimes it's just simply manipulation. It's just simply manipulation. And we got to call a spade what it is. And I've seen a lot of
Yeah.
churches, a lot of church individuals, not churches, but I'll say church individuals participate in manipulation to get people to serve or to do, because again, you're essentially asking people to volunteer their time for free. So what it becomes is, let's add in this extra spiritual layer,
Do
because
this
now I'm
for the
adding in a
Lord.
layer of moralism, like morale, like you're
Yeah.
good if you do this and you're not good if you don't serve, if you don't do this.
As long as I do a labor of love.
Exactly. But here's my thing. I've seen people work themselves into the ground, end up in hospitals, fast at the wrong time, just doing things
Sure.
like just trying to give every and anything to the church. Again, and they're doing it with a pure heart, and I know God honors it. But at some point, when do we realize that we're actually causing self-harm to ourselves? And I don't know if God would be pleased with this level of sacrifice, because you may not be around to actually continue to give it. And the thing is, the church also doesn't recognize on the other end. Again, it's just like this constant, like, here's the bar, you jump up, reach it, now it's here.
Yeah.
And it feels like this constant, like, moving of the post line. And I feel like so many people like us are people I've seen who end up in ministry. Again, yeah, we could be like, oh, well, the church is their fault. But obviously, I realize that it's actually nuanced, and it's the work belongs on both ends. But I realize, again, churches readily have not actually taken their part in the work that they readily play,
Yeah.
and being any different than how the world is and how these companies operate and how these other, because again, companies do that to people. I worked for Google and these other places, again, where they'll use you up and use all your gifts, all your talents. Again, yeah, you're getting paid, but at the end of the day, again, it's dehumanizing in a lot of
You
ways.
feel
And
expendable.
expendable, and like what I bring to the table doesn't necessarily matter. Now, again, that story has more so to do with you as a person and how you relate to it. But we also got to be real about the church's part that they play in it and how these systems actually chew people up and spit them out.
I agree.
Because
Even when it comes down to, like, old school Baptist churches and Pentecostal churches, when you used to see, a young organ player or a drummer literally get booted out the seat.
get rebuked, embarrassed, sat
Get
down. Like, come on.
everything.
Yep.
Like, there's so many different things that have just culminated into this one big fluffy ball of offense, and
Yes.
realizing that you're not going to take that no more. You're not going to take that anymore. And I don't want it to seem like my answer is simply for wanting to walk away and agreeing with that post is just resentment. The biggest piece of it is I've seen him move out in the street, out
Okay.
in the middle of Lamert. I
Yep.
remember I remember right when the pandemic hit, and I, my son was, on like a little mini vacation, so I went on a vacation to Atlanta, and I met this guy uh, in the middle of the byways, okay, next to the bar, in the middle of the strip club, okay, nasty little strip club,
Listen. Yeah.
who happened to be running away, not running away, but getting away because his twin brother had just been killed at a restaurant right around the corner from my house.
Mm.
And as soon as I said where I lived, he gasped and like almost dropped his drink. This man is like 6'3", 6'4", 300-pound man with dreadlocks, weeping at the bar, weeping at the bar.
Mm.
And we spent like 2 hours talking to each other at the bar about the Lord and what He will do and how He chases after you to help you do all this stuff outside.
Yeah.
I thought the Lord wasn't out here. I thought He don't. Saw him moving Lamert in the middle of 43rd and Degnan in Lamert Park, and I just know him to be bigger than the four walls.
Yeah.
And now that I have seen in some ways the grass is greener over here, I think I'm okay. I'm okay sitting down.
Yep.
I'm okay releasing that check. You know what I'm
And
saying?
and that's one of the pieces again, Asia, that I've always loved about your story and about you. And I think that's, if there's anything I want people to walk away with from your story, because again, I'm actually want to do a part 2 to this, is
Yeah.
I want people to walk away with, especially those who have served in ministry or who are just constantly just living life and doing life, to realize that one thing again that I preach about, Asia, is remember this: it's okay to be you. The first day I met you, you have been the exact same person from when I met you to who you are now, and you already know I've been the exact same person from then to now,
Mm-hmm.
and not the same, not in terms of involvement and evolution and mentally, like we've grown in those areas, but what I saw was what I got, and I've always appreciated that, and I want people to realize that it's okay to simply show up as you, because when you show up as you, it's what draws. Again, it was one of the main things that I think that made you magnetic. It's one of the main things that made people draw to you, and you immediately became like, "Oh, Asia, that's the girl." Again, you became that girl. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I want people to realize like that it's okay to actually just show up 102% as you. Again, even if you talk about, so I'm sure somebody here, oh, the worship he was in a strip club, but like again, people find different things that they'll hear throughout this conversation. Oh, they, again, to find different disqualifiers or whatever there may be. And I realize again that has a lot to do with their own stories that they tell themselves or that are related to them, than it has to do with who we are. And again, that's one of the pieces that I've always appreciated about you, because again, real.
Yeah.
Not perfect. Perfect is not real.
Yeah. That was clear.
It's taken me 34 years to realize that perfect is not really actually a real thing. The only one who was Jesus, and it's just not. There was only one. Like, it's just
Yeah.
not there. Perfect is not an actual thing. And the other piece that I want people to walk away with from this story, and specifically from your story, and even this as we talk about ministry, is it's imperative and important for us to learn how to set boundaries and to hold boundaries, even in ministry, even around our own gifts. It can be flattering. It can be like all these type of things, all sorts of things. Again, even if you are extremely gifted and you want to serve and give these gifts out, cool. But I think one of the biggest pieces that I would want people to walk away with is make sure you're in tune with your discernment to realize when my gift needs to be used, when it doesn't need to be used. Is it for this atmosphere? Is it for this place? Because again, a lot of places will use a lot of, just like when you get a new job, like a place will use all sorts of things, so they'll hype you up and everything else. But the minute they've extracted or what they've gotten out of you, then I think a lot of people end up in church and they think that church is any different, but it's humans.
Yeah.
Humans
Yeah.
are the same, whether we're
Yeah.
at work or whether at church. Like, the systems are the same. We
Yeah.
want something from you, and I want to get something out of you. So my whole point is, if you are somebody who works in ministry, I need you to understand and know your value and your worth.
Yeah.
Because when you know your value and your worth, even as hard as it is, even if it means losing opportunities or saying no to certain things, there's certain things that you won't involve yourself in, or you won't put up with, or that you won't continue to stay in.
Yeah.
And then we avoid the place of getting to the places of resentment and those, like what you talked about.
Sure.
So if we were to leave on this conversation, Asia, with this again, before we continue on with part 2 for our next conversation, what would you actually what would you tell somebody who's navigating ministry, who maybe they still want to be in ministry, maybe they still don't want to? Like, what advice would you give somebody who's navigating many of the things that you've had to navigate as a worship leader, as a pastor, somebody who's also gifted, but who's also human, who struggles, who's real?
You know, I would say that first understand that what you were created for. Understand that first. Understand who your creator is and what you are in the role as creation. And keep that always on the forefront. I think there's definitely a way to take ministry outside of the church, and it's not super deep.
Right.
It's not throwing a whole bunch of scriptures at people. It's not throwing blessed oil on them and holy water on them. And can we pray right now? Can I pray right now for you? It's not all that.
Yep.
Jesus spoke in parable, so that he could really get the humanity part out of the way. Which means he just met them eye to eye. You know what I'm saying?
Which is empathy.
Which was
I came
empathy.
down to your level. I came to
Yeah.
make you where you were at, rather
Yeah.
than demanding that you meet this list. And if
Mhm.
you don't meet this checklist, then you don't fit into this club. And again,
Yeah.
that's one of the pieces that I've always, again, you're a misfit. And that's one of the pieces that I think, again, has been amazing about your ministry. You being that misfit.
Exactly.
But I realize that when you are a misfit or you're an outlier, again, the rejection, all the stories you tell yourself or that you go through that we have a hard time really talking about, like, we want to talk about that because we need to be real about it, because again, a lot of these internalized messages that aren't really coming from us. And I realized, like, Jesus was a misfit.
Yeah.
That was his whole ministry.
Right? Because when you, man, there's this book called Zealot, and it's about Jesus. Well, anyway. But I think about that often. Like, for real, in order for him to have been received in some of these places, he had to have been able to relate in a way. And I'm not saying that Christ sinned. That's not what I'm saying.
Yep.
But he was able to relate. If you don't have any, presuppositions or experience of a certain realm, don't just dive yourself in there, because they're gonna tell. They're gonna be able to tell you're not from around here.
Yep.
And not in a good way. You're coming over here and it's a little bit invasive. You know what I'm saying? Let things organically happen. Find them in the spaces where you would normally find yourself if you wasn't in church. You know what I'm saying?
And we have
if
to
you're only
stop.
in church, get out of church for a second.
Period. And we have to stop shaming people for when they do go out, because it's like, oh, they backslid, they went out there. I'm realizing that those experiences are so imperative and important to people, because I realize that's what makes you relatable to a lot of people. I'm not saying you need to go out there and do whatever, but I'm just simply saying, like, again, everybody's not going to relate to somebody who's been born in the pews their entire life, or who's never had any life experience, who's never, like, and at the end of the day, I don't care how deep and holy you are. We all out here struggling. We all deal with things. We get horny. We all sometimes want to numb ourselves with a drink. Sometimes we want, like, there's so many things that are like real, and I'm tired of us not really.
And when we really think about it, the way pastors, and those who are really good shepherds really look over the church. You mean to tell me they ain't deserving of a stiff glass of bourbon?
I mean, run me in Manhattan, something, Long Island. I'm not saying that's what people like. They have to.
The worship leader can't have an espresso martini.
And the crazy part is, a lot of them already are doing it.
They are, but let me come closer. Come closer. They don't feel comfortable enough because they
to talk about it.
Oh, look, let me mess it up. Okay, Lord, I'll really
Jesus. But like real, but what you saying is like a real thing, though. They don't
feel comfortable to be human. They got y'all back all the time, but how do you check in with them for real?
Yeah.
How do you help them decompress for real? And you wonder why we losing people so young. You wonder why we're losing our pastors and our deacons and our evangelists the way that we are.
Rather than getting caught up on, oh, they're drinking or they did this or they did that, I think we lack curiosity. Why did this person suddenly turn to this? Why is this person suddenly changing or whatever? Are they numbing? Is something else going on deeper?
You know what? I think in the
Yeah.
Black church we don't lack curiosity at all. I think we do have those conversations. You know, I think he over there feeling that way because he over here, you know who he was out with. You
Okay,
know
you
who they
being
was. You
facts.
know,
Facts.
she over there feeling the way she is because her husband ain't got no job. We good. We're good and curious about everybody else's stuff,
Which
but
is so,
we're never curious as to how to help them.
and we're never curious as to why we feel so much judgment. Because again, I've even learned in my own life, when I have a strong judgment about something, a behavior that somebody's done, or something that I see externally, and why would they even, I'm feeling a real strong way. I've been able to really draw a lot of lines that usually relates back to something to me. There's something that I saw in myself, or I recognized, or that I didn't like. And I think a lot of people in the church, again, we're conditioned and we're taught to, look at them. They fell out the church. Like, we're taught that it's very, don't let your good be evilly spoken of. So we really take these type of verses and these type of things to heart. So it's easy for us to do this.
Yep.
Point these fingers at everybody else. But I'm realizing so many of us, especially so much of our older generation, they lack the ability to actually self-reflect and have accountability.
Yeah.
They lack the ability to actually say, let me own my piece in it. While also, like, again, I'm realizing a lot of people, and whether it's the older generation or not, it's just people. A lot of people don't know how to hold the nuance of that.
Yeah. And again, because they didn't have tools and permission to do so.
No. And the thing is, we have the tools and permission now, but I'm realizing we either have people who are doubling down in, I don't want things to change and I want to be like this and this is how it's always been. Or we have people going to the other extreme or completely walking away. And I think that's the piece where I'm just like, how do we find like a balance or in between where, again, you don't have to completely walk away and leave this, but like, how do you protect yourself and make sure that you also aren't putting yourself in a situation that's completely harm's way without basically like killing your spiritual life, because again, it affects so many areas of who you are.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. I think it's just we got to create a pattern of seeing, somebody struggle and identifying what characteristic is in there and trying to empathize and approach with love.
Yeah.
And if it's not received, then you just have to live that thing out. And eventually someone's lifestyle will entice them. Just like they say, a holy sanctified lifestyle is going to help draw in the unbeliever to the belief. This will also do the same thing, I think.
I absolutely believe, and I'm like, a holy lifestyle is not, I don't think is what even draws people in. I think the peace is what draws people in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what we have to learn how to, again, to focus on. But Asia, we can keep going in this conversation like forever. But I really wanted to say thank you for making space and time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, just to share elements of your story and to share parts of who you are. Because again, this is just a fraction of your story and who you've been, and obviously what I know of who you are. And obviously we'll have a part 2 to this conversation, but I appreciate you because, again, I think this is a elephant in the room that we don't often talk about, that we don't talk about what it's like in ministry, whether it's being a single mother, whether it's things that Black women encounter that, again, we just don't talk about. So I appreciate you for your vulnerability and just you holding space and being willing to share these aspects of your story and in your life. Seriously, thank you.
Of course, of course.
You already know you're one of my X-Bone clones, so I appreciate you, like, real too, like, seriously. And again, y'all, if y'all do get a chance, I'm assuming they can find you on Spotify, Apple Music. They can
yes,
find you.
You can find me any streaming platform that is your choice. You will find Asia Marie Off My Chest.
So listen, y'all, find her EP Off My Chest. Again, her original single Dreamer, which was an amazing bop. Check that out. And look up Asia, AJA Marie. So make sure y'all get the name. But seriously, Asia, thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. Thank you all for joining for this episode of Elephant Stories. My hope and my desire is, again, that you all are able to walk away with not all the answers, but with more truths about yourself and about what matters to you and what matters in your own personal journey. So I hope this episode was an encouragement to somebody. Thank you all for joining us. And as always, you already know, don't let that trunk hit you on the way out.
Correct.
So thank y'all. Appreciate it. All right.
Bye,
I'll see y'all
y'all
next time. Bye, everybody. All righty, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode of Elephant Stories Podcast. It has been a pleasure to not only engage in this story and engage in this conversation, but also to have you all along for the journey and to have you along to lend your ear and your time and your energy for this story. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Before you go, if you enjoyed today's episode, if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed the story, if you found parts of you in the story, if you feel like this is something that can help support somebody else in their own journey as they're navigating their own story or their own elephant in the room, I would love for you to share this episode. I would love for you to send it to somebody. I would love for you to engage in the content, whether it's dropping your thoughts in our social media platforms on TikTok or Instagram. We want to hear from you, and we want to engage in your thoughts and what are the elephant in the room that you all are dealing with, and what are your thoughts on today's episode. So please feel free to engage in this content. And also, one last thing. I'm not a licensed professional. I'm just a guy who loves sociology. I studied in college. It's been something I've always loved. I've always loved the study of human beings and how we function and how we move and how we exist and show up in the world. So that's it. If you are in need of professional help or you need seriously some mental services or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to us at info@elephantstoriespodcast.com. We can provide a list of services and some other resources that we have available that we do know of. But please feel free to seek out professional assistance if that's what you actually need. This podcast is in no way a substitute for that. So anyway, thank you all for joining me. I'm grateful for you all to be here. I'm so excited for this first season and to share more content with you all. And until next time, don't let that trunk hit you on the way out. Alrighty, y'all. Thanks for joining me.